Good evening. So once again, I am not King Mike L. According to HR, he is allegedly still on assignment, or allegedly he is still recovering from the beatdown that he received by a group of rogue puppets. Whichever story you want to believe. I'm Dreamy David Barr. Let me bring in our guest co-host, Sin Schrader Hill. How are you this week?
I'm great. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
it's a pleasure to have you. And I don't know which story to believe about Mike. I just hope everything's okay.
I was going to ask you, which way are you leaning? Which one?
I've been doing some research about like possessed dolls, and there's
Yeah.
no reason why there can't be some possessed puppets who may have gone a little rogue and attacked our friend. And if you know Mike's kind of built, and he doesn't take any shit from people. So
But he also antagonizes. So,
he
he could have
does.
just started it. Who knows?
One or two puppets, I think he'd be fine. But if this was like a group of five or more, it's kind of hard to fend off. So who knows? How's your week going?
Pretty good. How about yours?
I'm having a good week. It's going by
Yeah.
pretty fast. I thought today was Thursday, though.
Not
And
yet.
yeah, I
No,
know. And that would have been bad because I would have missed the podcast tonight.
that would have been really bad. Really, truly bad.
Yeah,
Especially because you've got a really interesting story.
I do. And so do you.
Yeah.
So what do
Yeah.
what do you have for us this week, Sin?
Are you ready for it?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Do you think they're ready for it?
I think they are.
Okay.
I can't talk like Mike does. He's good at like the witty banter and all that stuff, and I'm just a kind of like let's get to it kind of guy. That's
We'll
why
do it.
we work so well together.
We're doing it right now.
All right,
Right now.
let's go.
All right, we're going to start in Mexico.
Okay.
Chihuahua, Mexico. La Pascalita. This is from 1929. Now, legend has it a girl getting just before her marriage got bit by a black widow and died. Her mother, inconsolable, as anyone would be, she owned a dress shop. Now, soon after, within the next year, a mannequin appeared in her dress shop wearing a bridal gown. The mannequin looked suspiciously like her deceased daughter.
That's
So much
crazy.
so that people thought it really was her. Maybe she had this corpse mummified and used as a dummy. Store workers that had to change the dresses were even afraid of this thing was so realistic compared to the other 1920s mannequins that were around at the time. She looked so real, down to lines on the palms of her hands. Now that's pretty distinct. So people were terrified of her. Now, word got around that this mannequin's eyes would follow you, and people in the store that would be shopping would swear to it that this girl's eyes followed them. It also was said that she would move positions just a little bit every once in a while and change her hand positions quite often. Who knows what exactly she was? Maybe instead of a mummy, she was more of a post mortem death mask kind of effigy that the mother had made, like in likeness of her daughter. But if you think about it, if everyone thought this was her daughter, and you've heard of thought forms becoming reality, right? So if that many people thought this thing was real, what if the mother had actually put energy into this vessel that tried to bring her daughter back? What do you think about that?
That's pretty crazy, but I do know that they practice things like brujeria and stuff like that down. So they do believe in certain occult magics and things like that. So it's believable to me.
right?
Who
I
knows?
want to see her. I want to see this doll, this huge mannequin.
Yeah,
She's still there. They still dress her. I want to see her.
that's crazy.
That is crazy. Okay, now let's skip to another kind of bride. We're
Okay.
going to go over to China now. So, in China and other parts of Asia, there are ancient rituals that they still do relating to marriage. And this particular thing appears to be over 3,000 years old, this ritual. To this day, ghost marriages are a thing from way back. Now, if one of the engaged couple dies, then they can have a ghost marriage. If someone is dying, they can have a ghost marriage. It's up to the families to get together and get this stuff together so that they can carry on the bloodline. And that's what's most important, to carry on the name. And women aren't so much important other than to procreate. So they worry more about the men keeping the name going than anything, right? So if a son actually dies before his wedding, if they can entice a live girl to marry him after he dies, then they will have a daughter-in-law forever and ever and ever, and she will take care of them. They will adopt someone for her to be their son so that the son will inherit the dead guy's property. She can't inherit it, but the
Right.
son did, right? So all this stuff going on. And in these marriages, you can even have paper effigies of different things, a home. So, I mean, if they even had the two people that died and they wanted to keep their name going, they could marry those two. They could get this paper house, appliances, anything that a house would need and a family would need, clothing, etc. Just like paper doll stuff. Buy it, put it in this area, and create a home for this couple. The name lives on. What do you
And
think
to
about
them,
that?
that's the important thing. Now, Sin, do you think these things are kind of? Do you know what a drop in is? So, like when
What is it?
a drop in, when a
Mm-mm.
person suppose like allegedly their soul leaves their body and another one
Okay.
comes in and like finishes out that lifetime. Do you think some of this practice could be like bringing the souls of the deceased loved ones into the surrogate bodies?
Maybe. Very well could be. Do you think so?
I think anything's possible. So
Especially with this kind of crazy stuff, right?
yeah, I mean you've got some kind of rituals and stuff like that going
Yeah.
around these things. So who
I mean,
knows?
there's even they talk about the family may refuse to bury a son until they find a girl for him to marry after he's dead. And they can search years for somebody to take that person's place. Um, when a local female is heard to be in the hospital sick and dying, all these people flock to that sick room and start haggling with the family, and the bidding starts. Now, when it first, let's see, I guess it said, what was the date? Not too terribly long ago, about 30 years ago, a corpse bride would cost about $1,300 American. Now, you can't get one bone under 31,000.
So
That's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money, and it I don't know, kind of blows my mind. That's a little crazy.
No,
That's intense of
and
these people that go through all of this just to have this ceremony and keep the name going on and that kind of stuff.
yeah, and it's so big that they're actually marriage brokers just for this. It's a business.
Yeah.
It's this huge business.
I'm sure there's like a match.com kind of thing for this stuff too. If not, someone's gonna take that idea and run with it. Watch.
Findyourcorpse.com.
Yeah. Corpse bride, corpse groom.
Yeah. Yeah. Ew. Mm-mm. Oh,
People.
if it's a girl, here's something else that was kind of sad. An unmarried daughter is called an autumn leaf. She's past her prime. She's about to fall off and die, and she's actually bringing shame to her family. So if they can't find somebody for her, they will put her somewhere and declare her disabled, you know, unwanted, whatever, and go so far as to put her in an outbuilding, take her to a temple for spinsters. Um, if they can't do any of that, they'll just put her outside, let her
That's
die
just
outside.
that's just sad. That's a
It is
human being. Like how can you do that to a human being?
exactly, but it's they look down on, if that person, you know, it doesn't matter if you're ugly. That's not it. If you're not mentally able to take care of yourself, they consider that, beneath them,
Right.
and push it away. So that's kind of sad.
It's
That's
very
awful.
sad.
That's
It
awful.
is. I don't know. Just leaving someone outside to die. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone should do
There's
that to them. See how they like it.
and they won't. There's even a black market for this kind of stuff. So people will murder and sell the bodies. They'll
Oh
dig
yeah.
up bodies,
I'm
and
sure
resell.
they sell off the organs and things like that. And
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, for a corpse bride, you need the whole body, or corpse man, you need the whole body. Usually,
right,
it's the
right.
bride, though. Yeah, but if they can get their unmarried daughter married to a corpse man, they're set. She's taken
Yeah.
into the man's family, and she's good. She's good. But yeah, black market murders, digging up graves, changing the death certificate, all that good stuff is wild.
It is wild. It's Mexico. I mean,
Well, that
stuff.
part was China.
Oh, sorry, China. China.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Mexico was La Pascalita.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's what I got tonight.
China's got some crazy cultural beliefs. I mean, I'm not judging, but it's very different from what we would consider normal. But,
Exactly.
all right.
Exactly.
Well, those are some pretty interesting stories. Thank you, Sin.
You're welcome.
So we hear the term whistleblower more and more over the last few years, right?
Yeah.
So the other day, a new whistleblower came out and claimed that the government is studying UFOs of non-human origin. And as I go through this story, I want our viewers to just think about all the things that Jet Fuel Gene Broida has been telling us throughout the weeks since we've started this podcast. Some of it's going to start sounding familiar to you. So we have David Charles Grush. He's a 36-year-old. He's got experience working for the National Reconnaissance Office, or NRO, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA. And he's saying that the U.S. has successfully recovered and examined unidentified flying objects, UFOs, or as they call them, UAPs now, unidentified aerial phenomena. And he's saying that they're not of human origin. He's emphasized that the recovered materials include both fully and partially intact crafts. So that's pretty interesting. Grush asserts that he has provided classified information of significant magnitude to Congress and the Inspector General for the intelligence community. He said this information pertains to highly secretive programs that, I'm going to use Mike's favorite word, allegedly possess recovered vehicles of non-human origin. Um, and he's saying that the information he's provided has been unlawfully withheld from Congress. Also, allegedly, there are other intelligence officials, both currently serving and retired, who have independently verified and supported the information provided by Grush. He stated that the government, along with its allies and defense contractors, have been conducting recoveries of these kinds of vehicles for several decades now, including it still goes on in present day. And through analysis, it's been concluded that the retrieved objects exhibit unique vehicle morphologies and undergo material science testing, leading to the determination that they originate from exotic sources, potentially of non-human intelligence. And that's something that Gene's talked about, how these things can like change shape. And another thing that Gene has also told us that Grush mentioned is that these objects, they possess distinct radiological signatures and atomic arrangements. So those are all things that Gene's been talking about this whole time. And now you have someone who's worked for these agencies that's blowing the whistle on the whole thing.
Did you happen to look over at the chat, private chat?
Not yet.
You might want to.
Okay.
It's from Gene.
Oh no. All right. So, all right, since Gene's here,
Yeah.
why don't we bring her out so we can all discuss this story? Oh, okay. She popped off for a second. She's adding her information.
I think she's got some more stuff.
I think Gene's got a lot of stuff. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm giving an overview. Gene's going to go into more detail. But what I want people to realize is that Gene knows her stuff. This is all stuff that she has been telling us week after week. So let's bring her on. Gene.
There she is.
How are you?
Jet Fuel Gene on the job, on the case, on the spot, on the fly.
So, Gene, I know you want to talk about this too.
Well, there's only one thing anybody on Ufology Street is talking about, and that's this dude Grush.
But I wanted to mention,
and by dude I mean esteemed military veteran. Okay, or is he even a veteran? This is breaking so fast. This is crazy. But who am I? Who am I to even talk about this? Well, I wrote a book, for one thing. That impresses some people. But I've been researching UFOs. Now they want to call them UAPs. I have a comment about that in a little bit too.
And Gene, I just
wanted for decades, literally decades, and I'm not the only one. So go ahead.
I wanted to stress that some of the things that he's been saying about the UFOs being able to change shape and the radiation that emanates off of them, these are all things that you've been talking about all along. So this is right in your wheelhouse, and you have someone from these government agencies confirming all of the things that you've been telling us.
Thank you for that endorsement. But to be fair, I'm not alone. There are legions and legions of civilian scientists, civilian UFO researchers who have been, we all use the same source material. Let's face it. When a scientist looks at the same fact set, it's likely that on average, the scientists will reach similar, if not the same conclusions. Okay, that's math and science all kind of jumbled together. We're talking about averages and opinions. Okay, but I don't want to digress too much. Can you share my screen, please? Because I think first, let's start with who is this guy? Okay. Who's saying what to whom about what?
Gene, before I do
that,
why
should we care?
I want to make one more point that, you talk about our civilian scientists who we greatly appreciate their work, but I also want to point out that 1 in 5 academic scientists believe in UFOs and that we need to study this more. So both communities are supporting this and coming together and sharing research and information and supporting all these things.
Again, though, I want to stress, we're talking about science and math and engineering.
Yes.
We're not talking about belief or faith.
Yes.
Okay. I don't believe in UFOs. I've been certain since I first started serious research into the matter that the US government and other world governments have been approached by aliens. I know it sounds incredible, have made treaties with them and agreements. Aliens work alongside military and contractor engineering teams. They're probably advising or somehow at least monitoring, observe. They do a lot more observing, it seems, than meddling, if you will. But they do seem to be involved in reverse engineering of their own craft. And there are many species, many kinds of crafts. And so when the gentlemen we're about to see speaking in an exclusive interview with News Nation, this gentleman is decorated. He's not just a fly by night. We'll get into his background in a little bit. But when I do research, the first thing I want to do is go to the source. And it took me six separate searches before I actually got to the source, which is this guy right here in the video talking to the News Nation reporter. Okay. And it's not very long, but I think the reason that I like to go to the source first, and this is by no means the full interview, but I want to study the body language of the witness, in this case, whistleblower. I want to look into their eyes. And I have psychic abilities, but I don't pretend to be a mind reader or anything like that. My position all along as a researcher has been, and as a sane and rational person has been, other than grandstanding for 15 minutes of fame, why would anyone in a profession such as the military come out and talk about a pretty much still taboo topic? We now have whistleblower immunity, so-called, but I'm going to talk about really what's going on now in terms of the psychological spin, the psyop that's now going on from the U.S. military regarding whistleblower intelligences and facts that citizen scientists have known for decades. Okay. So may we start at the beginning with our witness. Let's judge his credibility firsthand before we look into his background and the details of more details of what he is revealing. Does that sound fair?
Sounds fair. Audra says hi, by the way.
Ready?
Thank
Hi,
you for
Audra.
joining us, Audra.
Fasten your seatbelts. Jet Fuel Gene and company about to take off.
All right.
Are we ready?
Ready.
This is all queued up.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will. It's probably not the right parlance, but no kidding, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
Are you able to hear him?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, good. Let me resume.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
Okay, quite a number. This is old news. All of this is old news. In other words, we've had insiders disclose this. Bob Lazar was one of the first. Bob Lazar worked in one of these reverse engineering facilities outside of Las Vegas, and he's well documented, well documented, far better than I could ever do. Here's a modern military whistleblower giving the same testimony that we've heard decade over decade over decade, and it's mainstream news. This is the news. The news that this article is mainstream news is the news. All right, so let's look at what public reaction is to this, okay? So first, I took a look at there's two sides of this. There's the citizen side, and then there's the military-industrial complex side, which is also intelligence organizations such as the CIA. So on the civilian scientist side, we have a growing number of elected representatives in the United States, congresspeople and senators, who are expressing interest in the topic of knowing more about UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, as the Pentagon would like to spin it now, pretending that we know nothing about this after decades and decades of research. It's a brand new thing. We don't know much about these UAPs, but here's a military whistleblower saying that he has intel. And what he's talking about are non-human origin crafts. Basically, it's being called crash retrieval program. Well, I covered the Roswell crash of 1947, summer of 1947, in chapter 3 of my book, Unknown Objects, the Top 10 U.S. UFO Cases, because here's a classic example of crash retrieval, as is basically every case of UFO crash. Kecksburg is another chapter in my book, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, where a ship wafted in and had a semi-controlled crash landing in a gully, a stream bed, and as curious townspeople gathered and hunters tracked through the woods, direct line of sight, they got there first. They didn't have to take the roads, they knew the country. So they got there first. They saw the gouge marks in the earth, and they saw the smoking craft, basically, and they saw the strange writing on it, and they saw all the stuff. And within a half hour, the military whisked in and did craft retrieval. And you can find out more about that reading my book or elsewhere. It's well documented. All these cases are well documented, okay? We're not just making this stuff up. So who is David Grush? He is former U.S. military and intelligence. So he's bridging both of these communities. He's given this interview. He says the United States has discovered and covered up. This is what's critical about his whistleblowing. He's put the Pentagon and associated organizations on the spot, accusing of a cover-up. Well, we all know it's true. We in the ufology community know this is true. We don't even particularly need to hear this guy say it, but it's good that he is. I applaud him. What's really interesting, though, is the reaction to it. And so Congress people are saying they're on the fence. Most of them, frankly, don't know much about the topic, and they don't want to embarrass themselves later. That's totally understandable. But there are a few of them that appear to know rather more than the others, and they are trying to shelter and protect the whistleblowers as best they can while maintaining that appropriate level of skepticism that the intelligence agencies demand, not the public. It's their controllers, the handlers at the CIA demand a certain level of communication, or they close in and things start to shift and change. And I'll prove it here just in a moment. Okay, so here is one comment by a professor of electrical and computer engineering. He's the director of the Center for Space Physics at Boston University. Here's a quote from him. This is from Newsweek. Reputable source, Newsweek. It's not a tabloid. Okay, right. Newsweek, quote, the majority of UFOs can be accounted for as balloons, drones, or drifting aerial junk. I'm going to stop the quote there and comment on that one sentence. Yes, that's true. So what? Continuing quote, in some cases, the visual impression is impacted by perspective bias, where a slow nearby object looks like a large, rapid, distant object, unquote. Again, so what? We're talking about a trained military observer, an intelligence officer who knows terrestrial from non-terrestrial. We're not talking about swamp gas, and we're not talking about the planet Venus here. We're talking about warehouses and hangars. I'm talking about aircraft hangars full of spaceships, not aircraft. Well, they're aircraft. They're spacecraft. They're full of spacecraft. I get excited. Okay, but he goes on. That said, there is a small percentage of observations that remain unexplained. Well, we knew that from Project Blue Book, late 1950s, early 1960s. Again, nothing new here, people. These cases generally involve an object that exhibits unusual flight characteristics. For instance, rapid acceleration, rapid velocity, or extreme maneuverability, characteristics that cannot readily be accounted for through known technologies. Yes, you're preaching to the choir here, and there have been more and more revelations and whistleblowing going on. But let's turn our attention now to the other side of the story, or the narrative, actually, which would be the source of the new narrative, the Pentagon in the United States. Here's Fox News headline from June 7th. That's today, this morning, 10:25 Eastern time. This is how fresh this story is, people. oh, my listeners. Headline: Pentagon denies secret UFO retrieval. Note this headline doesn't say UAP. Pentagon denies secret UFO retrieval program after whistleblower bombshell. Experts and journalists backed whistleblower David Charles Grush, a decorated Air Force veteran who said the U.S. retrieved crafts of, quote, non-human origin. So the Pentagon's playing, no, 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 no. So here's where we are. Here's where we are. We are at a point where the Pentagon says the craft are real, but they're not at all sure about who made them. In fact, they deny that anybody made them, that there's any sort of alien intelligence behind these craft. So they're just dodging the issue of who built them. They are not talking about the builders and pilots of these craft, which really are more interesting if you think about it than the craft themselves. Admittedly, the craft are interesting, but the pilots, these extraterrestrial beings, would be really interesting, wouldn't you think, to get to know if they're building this kind of technology?
Oh, definitely.
I think, right? So the Pentagon has sidestepped that whole issue, and they're focusing on the hardware. All right, well, there are plenty of hardware geeks out there too, and experts. By geek, I mean it as a term of endearment. Where I come from, geeks are technical experts that nobody else understands typically, and therefore, through not understanding, typically give warnings that are not heeded or pass information that is just not accepted because it's not understood. But in any event, this I'm sorry, I'm tongue twisted here. David Grush, our decorated Air Force veteran, is a reliable observer. He has nothing to gain and only to lose from whistleblowing. There is new legislation come through Congress to protect such whistleblowers, and predictably, the Pentagon's first reaction when sprung with a bombshell news story is, "We deny it. It didn't happen. Not on our watch." Well, this guy was your employee, basically. Or not your employee of the Pentagon necessarily, but of a branch of the military. Okay, military intelligence, there's the bleeding over. And I know that they are all compartmentalized and they wouldn't agree with that statement. But as an outsider looking in, it's easy for me to clump them all together. No offense to anybody in any branch of armed services or any aspect of military intelligence. What you do is valuable, at least up to a point. But I'd like some accounting for the trillions of dollars gone down the UFO cover-up hole. Another story, another day. The Pentagon says it didn't happen, and they sent out their mouthpiece. That's how one person termed her, Susan Gough. I actually don't know how to pronounce her last name. Gough. Gough could perhaps be Gough. Gough. I've quoted her before. She's the spokesperson for the Department of Defense, the DoD, and she told Fox News Digital in an email on Tuesday that there is, quote, no verifiable information to substantiate the claims. In other words, there's no declassified information, because verifiable means I could walk up to it and put my hands on it, which is what all these reverse engineers are doing it. And I've met reverse engineers at UFO conferences who have the credibility of, say, in one case, I won't name names, but in one case, this gentleman worked for NASA and he invented the human diaper for space. I kid you not, that became Pampers when he sold the patent and the idea to, after NASA got done with their use of it, he had rights to the idea and he sold it to commercial developers who have development. He's made quite a bit of money off that because it's a very clever invention and it's quite effective. And you need that in space. You need that in an enclosed space, in a space capsule. All right, that's where you need it. So she's saying deny, deny, deny. And to date, the Anomaly Resolution Office, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, ARROW. You're going to hear this acronym over and over on Ufology Street. All domain means all branches of the military, and I would suspect intelligence communities, perhaps even civilian. I don't know about that. But anomalies are things that are odd, and resolution means we're going to get to the bottom of this, even though they never do. And it's a section of the Department of Defense, which is why they sent out Ms. Goff, and they are tasked with investigating and identifying UFOs. And they act as if we've never done this before. And it's very strange and perplexing to people inside this decades-long research. It's very curious what's going on with the U.S. government right now. And I think I've said enough. I'll hand it back to the studio. Feedback.
So, Gene, I've watched things on, I think, the History Channel, and I've read stories. Like, what scientist wouldn't want to work on these crashed crafts, right? And there are stories and, testimonials where their silhouettes showing and their voices distorted, where, they went to this one location and they were bussed to like a secret base where they could start working on these things. So like you said, we know this stuff has been going on
Well,
for
let me
years.
answer your question, although you may have meant it rhetorically. The people who wouldn't are people who will not consent to sign the non-disclosure agreement that's required by the government agencies.
That
true. If you do work on these projects, mum's the word to everybody forever, or reprisals begin. First with you and your job and your reputation, but then with your family and friends, and then ultimately death. And that's what the CIA was designed, was invented to do. Believe it or not, CIA was invented. I did research on this a long time ago. I'd like to refine the source material because I want to be sure that I'm correct in this, but I did read from a reliable source that first it was, Harry Truman was approached after World War II with the phenomenon. He didn't know what to do, so he banded together 12 scholars, scientific scholars, to look into the topic and report back to him. And they said, this is a strange thing. We're not sure the public could handle it because it really does look like it's beyond our world. And I think perhaps clergy, Christian clergy might have been involved in some of this decision making, or at least there were Christian people involved in the scholars' research. Christian attitude is certainly part of this. And I'm speaking historically, I'm not biased toward Christianity. I'm saying that at the time in the American culture, Christianity prevailed. No offense again to anybody of any religious persuasion. That's just how it was. That's how the United States rolled in those days. We had "In God We Trust" in the Pledge of Allegiance, and nobody thought boo about it, of course. So my point being that scholars said proceed with caution. Then at the same time, we had insiders in the military, notably the first Secretary of the Navy, Forrestal. He was saying the public is mature enough to understand this. And he probably said, especially if we couch it, if we prepare them for it, right? But instead of preparing the public for the reality of UFOs, so the first organization, by the way, was the NSC, the National Security Council, was created by Truman to look into UFOs after this scholarly group said, we don't know. We need more investigation. So a military branch was invented, or actually, I'm sorry, an intelligence branch was invented, the NSC, it was created, and it became the NSA later, the National Security Agency, which still exists. But in the very beginning, the NSC's original job was to treat UFOs pretty much exclusively. And to be their police force was the CIA. They were signed into law 6 months later or so. So there's this nice, neat little timeline of Truman gets the word about UFOs, may have been approached by aliens, may have been offered a treaty. Unsure about that. A lot of reporting on that. I'm not completely convinced, but frankly, it stands to reason. If you're connecting dots, if you're a logician, it makes sense. But if you're a factoid, not necessarily. Okay, but we don't need to go there. What we do know is that the study group was formed up, then the NSC, then the CIA, and then Forrestal has been diagnosed with clinical depression, is put into a clinic in the Northeast. I don't want to say the wrong one. And he is treated for clinical depression in the style of the day, which is insulin shots. And he's not diabetic.
Oh, no.
He had a bad time with that.
And ultimately,
he was found out. A bunch of bed sheets were tied together, and he was hanging outside his window, the window of his room.
What?
There was broken glass on the windowsill and scuffle marks. Ruled suicide.
No.
So this was probably one of the CIA's first assassinations of a very high-ranking official, covered up very well. And it sent shivers through the whole UFO community, the insider intelligence community,
Right.
the military people who were witnesses and seeing this unfold. The first secretary of the U.S. Navy, for God's sake, got offed by the new CIA. This was very serious.
That's
And
a
that's
very
why
serious message.
today, that's why fast forward 75 years, I have to talk over you, 80 years, I have to get this out. 80 years later, today, we have congressional legislation saying, oh, don't worry about any of that history. Don't worry about Forrestal and all the others who died along the way because they told more than they should. They had signed those disclosure agreements that those people who don't want to work on these projects don't want to sign. But by then, who knows? It may be too late. They've already seen the goods. I don't even know how this works, but a lot of people do. And when they talk about it, they get reviled until now, and they're still being reviled by the Pentagon. The Pentagon saying, no, he's not telling the truth. He's lying. Well, what's the point of whistleblowing if you're going to be labeled a liar anyway by your employers, basically?
And who would want to put themselves through all the things that come along with being the whistleblower? Like I've heard similar things about
unless
people,
you want fame.
Yeah, but they also know
fame.
that there's a good chance that they're going to get killed, or something's going to happen to their family, or things like that. I've heard similar stories of people who whistleblew on the remote viewing program.
ESP even.
Yes.
Russell Targ. If you listen to him, I'll cover Russell Targ. ESP. Fascinating work, fascinating, and well within the realm of our paranormal news, right?
Definitely.
I mean, paranormal isn't just UFOs.
No,
it's all kinds of stuff. But what's interesting to me as a UFO researcher is how almost everything comes back to UFOs, and in our society to the UFO cover-up. The malaises, the that's a French word for not feeling good, not goodness, for the illness, basically illness in our society. I feel, I intuit there's an illness in our society. And a theme in my book is that I've grown up my whole life. I've lived in this big lie. And the big lie is beginning to crumble. The big lie that you must be crazy to believe in UFOs. That's the big lie.
That's my question, though. And
now the lie's, I'm sorry, the lie's starting to crumble, and yet it's not completely crumbled. Sorry, Sin.
No, that's totally fine. No, this is fascinating to me. But I have a question for both of you. Why now are we seeing so much about UFOs? Why now? Dave,
So recently, I can't think of the person's name off the top of my head. It was a politician who said that by the year 2029, we'll make contact. So, Gene, you were talking about preparing us. And now all these little things are coming out, by 2029, this could happen. We hear more about crashes and recoveries, and crop circles are appearing every year still. So I think, like Gene said, they're trying to prep us for. But I think most of the people in the world are prepared. I mean, we're not stupid. We know, or a good chunk of people at least believe that there's some kind of other life out there.
Right.
Well, the reality is so different. I was going to say mind-boggling, but it really isn't. The reality is so different from the official narrative that it's going to take, it took 80 years to get us to this place where the Pentagon is now finally saying, yeah, the hardware is real. Will it take 80 more years for them to say the ETs are real?
Well, here's the thing, though. They have the James Webb Telescope. They're finding all these planets that might be suitable for life.
I got to stop you right there. I just got to stop you because they're here now. They're here now working with humans.
Okay, but I'm saying this is all right. So I'll do it. The narrative
isn't theoretical. This is
the
actual.
narrative is that they're finding these worlds. There's a story the other day that there was a plume of water shooting out from one of the moons of Saturn.
Right.
And water sustains life.
Saw that.
So
exciting.
They're slowly preparing people for something. And I want to.
They're doing the job the CIA could have done in 1950. They are doing the job now the CIA could have done. Think about what our world would be like if instead of fear-mongering people and offing the likes of, sorry, I just spaced on his name, but Forrestal, instead of offing those people, instead of offing peacemakers like John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, John Lennon, instead of offing those people, yes, I say they're all CIA constructed killings, assassinations. I say it. And if you want me to dig up some, I mean, some of this you can't prove, but in my heart of hearts, I know it's true. Peace is out. War is in. Look at history. All the peace speakers are dead. And by whom? Guess who? The organization responsible for covering up UFOs. Connect the dots, people. So yeah, it's a new psyop from our federal government. We're being prepared for this quasi disclosure,
in the way they want us.
Yeah, prepared. And civilian scientists are still on the outs. Insider, retired or former military employees are on the outs. The dots are not connecting anymore. The dots stopped connecting. There's a disconnect. What is the disconnect? The disconnect is that our government is still lying. They're giving a partial truth.
The other thing is
denying the absolute truth, which is that they are here. We've known about them for decades, almost 100 years. We are in collaboration with them. I'm not going to say collusion, because they may be directing us. Who knows? Who knows? If our government threatens their employees with, at worst, death, what might the aliens be threatening those government employees with if they disclose too much? You see how it kicks uphill, as it were?
Yeah.
And even though we've watched Star Trek and Star Wars with the Prime Directive, we also see different kinds of species interacting with each other, which I believe is a fairly accurate portrait, not of specific species necessarily, but of the kind of exopolitics, if you will, that really goes on in the cosmos. You have allegiances of races, and you have who war on other allegiances of races, and who I don't really understand the war thing, why species feel the need to war at all. But it's a thing. It's a thing in cosmology. It's the most ancient thing, the war of light and darkness. It's this conflict. It's attraction and repulsion in physics, and that makes pulse. It's the core of all meaning, of all being, ever since there was anything. And no one understands it. And I get, here's where physics becomes metaphysics. Okay, and I once I start doing this with my hands, it's time for you to start talking, because
I also want to make a point. I also want to make a point towards Sin's question, is that nowadays everybody's got a high def camera, in their pocket. So it's easier to take footage of these things, and with the internet, it's easier to share all this stuff. So that might be why the story is crumbling and the narrative is starting to change a little bit. And I also want to give credit to my high school chemistry teacher, Mr. LaFontaine, who used to claim to be an alien as a joke. But he said that the elements that make up the Earth exist, they are constant, and they exist throughout the galaxy. So therefore, a combination like this one that could sustain life, it's possible that it came together elsewhere. So, he was a firm believer that there was alien life out there. God rest his soul. He was an awesome guy, made chemistry a lot of fun. But that, him telling the class that had a significant impact on me, because it really made me think and to expand my horizons that, oh yeah, all these elements do exist throughout the universe. Everything started from space dust. So there's got to be some kind of combination or some other kind of life that can sustain itself somehow, some way, somewhere out there.
Well, the odds are for it, as Drake's equation proves. But I'm less interested in mathematical equations such as Drake's, which seek to prove something that research shows pretty quickly is almost certainly true. We don't need mathematical constructs to determine how many. I mean, we can if we want. Apparently Drake did. He wanted to know what's the probability that, based on the number of planets we know to exist, and by the way, now we know many, many more planets exist, so we could, I'm sure people have reapplied Drake's equation, but given the nature of mathematics in the universe, it's probably nearly the same result. When you look at large numbers of planets and you look at their attributes, you get these so-called M class planets, like in those fictional portrayals of reality, that are capable of sustaining human life as we know it. Okay, which isn't to say that there are species of life that have different climactic conditions necessary for their lives, built out of the same cosmic building blocks. Those would be the elements of the periodic table, chemistry. So yes, they're here. They've been here. They're not going away. They are more powerful than us, and we can't control them. However, certain organizations are benefiting from their presence more than others of us. And we're getting trickle-down technology, computers, Velcro, microwaves, contact lenses, fiber optics. These are reverse engineered technologies, but they've got, well, who knows what they've got? I can only speculate what they've got.
Transporters. I read a thing the other day.
The imagination.
I read a thing the other day that they figured out how to make a tractor beam, like how the Enterprise used to, catch another ship in a tractor beam
and pull it in.
They've figured that out now.
Well, wouldn't it be gravitational pull on something metal at least?
Yeah.
Something metal.
So who knows?
I mean, that's a fairly easy technology. Tractor beam at short range, at least. We're talking parsecs of space, which is a big distance, by the way. Then, yeah, it's no mean feat. I don't mean to trivialize the accomplishment by any means, but I'm much more interested in things like Tesla energy, free energy from the Earth.
Oh, yeah.
So we could get away from energy bills. Yeah, well, there's another big taboo topic: free energy.
Oh yeah. It's funny that all of his paperwork and research was destroyed. So I mean,
funny, really funny. Nikola Tesla, genius.
Yeah. Oh, and total genius.
And he dreamed visions. He got inventions in dreams and visions. He wrote journals, articles about, or diary entries, whatever you want to call it, about communing or communicating with basically celestial beings, divine inspiration, if you will, or who knows, cosmic inspiration.
He was way ahead of his time.
Inspiration, who knows? If you're tuned to that, he was into frequency. That was one of his main areas of research, frequency. And so when you tune to the ETs say, and psychics, experiencers, UFO experiencers may say, not all of them say, but some of them have said that the way to communicate, if you want to communicate with them, you need to elevate your consciousness to theirs, and they need to diminish theirs to come down and meet us in the middle. Basically, it's some middle ground. They're dumbing down their intelligence, and we're like, it's not about intelligence, though. It's about the pineal gland, as near as I can understand, our cosmic receptor up here in the middle of our brain, right in the middle of the brain, shaped like a pine cone, hence its name, pineal, I guess, pineal, or pinal. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's thought
most people
to be
say pineal,
a chakra as well, the energy center for cosmic consciousness and communicating with your own oversoul, your own higher self. So Tesla was into that, apparently, as was Edison and many other great inventors that we know of. And how many people we've never heard of have this going on? Many. To answer Sin's great question about what about this proliferation of reports, I agree with Dave that, yes, we have much more technology at hand to take evidence. But the reason I think that military whistleblowers are coming forward is that they do have congressional assurance that there will be no reprisals. And we've already had one winning lawsuit of a medical nature brought against the Veterans Administration by one of the Rendlesham Forest subjects who touched the UFO and got cancer later.
Which you talked
his
about.
Cancer
that
was attributed to touching the craft, and the settlement mentioned that the illness was due to close proximity, radiation caused by close proximity to a landed UFO. I mean, it's right there in black and white in a lawsuit, federal lawsuit. So, this is not trivial. People act like it's brand new and it's a big surprise, like it's news. But the news is that the whistleblowers are being, well, it's not really news because I could have predicted it. And I'm not using any psychic talent here. I'm connecting dots. You think the Pentagon's going to say, yeah, he's right. We lied. He's right and we lied. No, they never say that. What they've done is like, history's an etch-a-sketch. The Pentagon has taken history as here's my metaphor. Etch-a-Sketch is history. Pentagon takes Etch-a-Sketch, shakes,
Takes it.
turns it down, says UAP on Etch-a-Sketch, twisting the UAP starts April 2020, April of 2020, tabula rasa. In other words, tabula rasa, it's Latin for clean slate. And the Etch-a-Sketch, when it's shaken, is literally a clean slate.
Right.
Okay? So they're taking a clean slate and they're reinventing history. They're reinventing this new narrative.
Gene,
It's very interesting.
We got to wrap it up with that, but that's a great point.
That's what I
you
had.
Left.
I'm done.
All right.
How about that?
In a few minutes, we have Into the Legit Darkness coming up at 9:05. Gene, you want to hold up your book?
You know I do.
All right, please do.
Sin, hold up books.
And
Sin
I
has
want
a
to
lot of
remind
books.
people,
Sin's a fabulous author.
Gene just had a birthday.
I have nothing but good things about Sin.
Gene just had a birthday. Help her celebrate. Go buy that book.
On Amazon.
Push it up on the bestseller list.
My name
Sin,
is
hold your books up
Rebecca.
again, please.
Here they go, all on Amazon.
Okay.
Sin Schrader Hill.
And
Come
that's
on.
all right. That's what we got. I got nothing except I hope Mike's okay. I hope he comes back to us. We're gonna get to the bottom of this. It's either some kind of special assignment or recovering from the great puppet beatdown of 2023. Hopefully he'll be back next week. We'll figure this out. We'll get some answers. Thank you everybody for joining us. So for Jet Fuel Gene Broida, for Sin Schrader Hill, I'm Dreamy David Barr. Until next time, dream well. Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.